a young perspective on hot-button issues around the world. This is The Hub.
As Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi is visiting the United States, the situation in the Middle East is rapidly escalating. Iranian authorities have confirmed the death of Iran's top security official Ali Larijani and Intelligence Minister Ismail Khatib, following an Israeli airstrike on Iran's South Pars field, the largest natural gas field in the world. Iran retaliated with attacks on Gulf energy infrastructure, and shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has nearly come to a standstill. U.S. President Donald Trump is calling for a Hormuz coalition to escort tankers, but allies are holding back. And in the U.S., Joe Kahn, the head of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center, has resigned over Iran conflict. So are we seeing cracks within the Trump administration as well as in the U.S. alliance system? And where is this conflict headed? To unpack all these questions and beyond, we're joined from Tokyo, Japan by Emmanuel E. Pastrich, president of the Asia Institute. Also in Tokyo, we have Benoit Hardy-Chiron, senior lecturer in the Department of Political Science and International Affairs at Temple University. In Chiang Rai, Thailand, we have James Dorsey, adjunct senior fellow at Singapore's Darussalam School of International Studies. And here with us in our Beijing studios, Einar Tangen, senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation and chairman of Asia Narrative Substack. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to this program. Great to have all of you back again. Now, James, if I can go to you first. Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz for, nearly 2 weeks. That is a checkpoint for roughly 20% of global oil. On March the 18th, the United States carried out strikes using multiple 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions on Iran, targeting hardened Iranian missile sites along its coastline. Are we at the brink of a wider regional conflict? How far do you think the United States is currently prepared to go?
We're definitely on the cusp of an escalation of the war for several reasons. One of those reasons is the Strait of Hormuz. Trump doesn't have an exit strategy, and he has at this point no good options if he wants to be able to declare victory and at some point end at least U.S. participation in the war. To do so, he needs to ensure that there is free passage through the Strait of Hormuz. To do that, he has several military options, none of which are in and of themselves good, would imply potentially a limited number of boots on the ground, and he has sought to have the support of his allies in Europe as well as in Asia. And what we've seen in many ways for the first time since Trump returned to the Oval Office in January of last year, that allies and partners of the United States are standing up and saying, this is not something we want to do. If you look at the last 14 months, as a final remark on this, Trump has successfully changed international relations. He has made himself the focal point, and countries have sought to either avoid getting on his bad side or earn brownie points by getting on his good side. This is the first time that is not the calculation.
Yeah, beyond military risks, there are a whole host of spillovers. Einar, what do you think are the most dangerous spillover effects on alliances, on the energy markets, which have been super volatile, and of course on regional stability?
Okay, I think you have to step back and understand that the U.S., as pointed out by my colleague, is trying to get out. They can't get out because Iran is dedicated to punishing the U.S. for killing the equivalent of their pope and their president and all of these other cabinet members, leaders. Yeah. And they're going to do that with economics, and that means they're going to continue to put pressure on not only the United States, but the entire world through closing the Straits of Hormuz. This is larger than most people understand, in the sense that next time that Iran sits down with the United States, they wanted to see a much diminished U.S., a U.S. that is not able to pay its debts, that will have to come to the table and give significant concessions and guarantees. At the same time, you have Israel, which is desperate to keep the United States in. They do not have the wherewithal to continue this war. It's 1,000 miles between the countries. They have 7.5 million Jews there, and there are 92 million Persians. So this is a very difficult situation for them. Everybody else is suffering. Today, you just had the Saudi Arabians literally get rid of all of the representatives from Iran, asking them to leave because of attacks on one of their key oil installations, processing installations. So this continues to get worse. And, you know, Iran has had 20 years to prepare for an asymmetrical war, and they are now implementing that, and it's being extremely effective, much more than they thought. You know, Pentagon is going to ask for $200 billion to push this war at a time when people's gas prices are so high that they don't even know if they can afford to go to work.
Yeah, I mean, this may well go down in history as one of the most successful Israeli lobby efforts in the United States ever. Who knows? Now, Benoit, if I can go to you, there are rifts not only within the Trump administration. We'll talk about the resignation of his top counterterrorism official, but the transatlantic solidarity, if you look at it, key U.S. allies are distancing themselves. German Chancellor Merz said, and I quote, "This war is not a NATO matter." British Prime Minister Starmer said, and I quote, "The UK will not be drawn into a wider Middle East war." And of course, Spain has been against this since day one, calling these actions illegal. Very strong remarks coming out of Madrid. Trump responded by saying that the U.S. does not need NATO, accusing some Western allies of quote-unquote ingratitude. Where do you see the transatlantic alliances going at this point?
Right. This is a great question, because I think what we have seen over the last few days in Trump's requests to America's traditional allies are responses ranging from very lukewarm to responses that were very strong, including the one that you just quoted from Spain. Originally, if I can talk about Canada, for example, there seemed to be some opening towards some kind of support for the United States, but even the Canadian Prime Minister quickly turned around, and there doesn't seem to be much of a chance of Canada offering much help. I would say the only country that has been more, I would say, non-committal at this point has been Japan, which we can talk about later. But in the case of the transatlantic alliance, we have seen a very negative response, and I would say that this is largely a result of Trump doing everything to alienate America's traditional allies from NATO. As we know, over the last year since he came back to the office, he has been quite confrontational, at times antagonistic towards NATO members. So he has not exactly built a wealth of political goodwill from traditional allies. And I think that plays a large part in the response. I would say, though, even if in a world where the United States had been more, I would say, accommodating, more nice towards NATO allies, I would still think that it would be relatively unlikely for them to come to the support of the United States in this one-way war, in this war of choice, as we can call it. But certainly the Trump administration's attitudes towards NATO has contributed to what is a relatively strong response in response to the Trump's demand for support. So yes, things are absolutely not going well, and I would say that it's largely of Trump's doing.
Yeah, especially if you look at the anti-war resentment from the European grassroots. That is remarkable. Now, Emmanuel, the International Maritime Organization, or IMO, has held emergency council meetings on shipping security in the Gulf region from March 18th to the 19th. And according to IMO, roughly 3,200 vessels carrying 20,000 seafarers are currently confined west of the Strait of Hormuz due to the conflict. And IMO head Dominguez also said naval escorts through the Strait of Hormuz will not 100% guarantee the safety of those ships, warning that military assistance was not a long-term or sustainable solution. So with thousands of vessels stranded, is there a viable path to de-escalation?
Well, I want to make one thing clear on the passage through the Hormuz, and that is that Iran had actually offered that countries that cooperated with its conditions could pass through. And international insurance companies refuse to insure the ships. So that's the reason why they're not passing through. It's not impossible to make a deal with Iran, but international corporations have refused to insure the ships. Regarding what's unfolding now, it's hard to see any solution in the near future. I think Iran is assuming, following a scenario they've prepared for over 20 years, to slowly ramp it up until the pain for the total global economic system is so great because of the cutoff of petroleum and natural gas and its impact on agriculture and on transportation, that the United States and the whole system around the United States will be forced to come to the table. And finally, I would note that by killing off Israel and the United States, the top people, that essentially Iran has gone to its Plan B, the mosaic as they call it, in which decisions are made at the local level and the chain of command is dispersed. That means that there is nobody in Iran anymore that you can engage in negotiations with. And that makes it much more difficult to come to resolution.
I mean, people have been speaking up and standing up within the Trump administration. On March 18th, U.S. counterterrorism chief Joseph Kent posted this, and he said his resignation letter has been submitted, stating that the war on Iran was not due to an imminent threat to the United States, but rather under pressure from Israel and its powerful lobby. So, James, is this war on Iran essentially exemplifying the Netanyahu government hijacking the Trump administration's decision-making? And, as many scholars, including John Mearsheimer, Stephen Walls, have been, writing and studying, researching about the Israeli lobby and its outsized influence on U.S. foreign policy making.
I think there's no doubt that the Israelis exploited a sentiment that is widespread in the United States. The U.S. has grievances against the Islamic Republic that are of its own account, going back to the 1979-1980 occupation of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran for 444 days, the 1996 attack on the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, in which U.S. military personnel were killed, attacks on the U.S. Marine barracks, the U.S. Embassy, the French military in Lebanon in 1982 that were carried out by groups aligned with Iran, and of course the role that the Iranians played in the development of improvised explosive devices in Iraq, for example, during the Iraq War. So there's been a long-standing account that is open between the United States and Israel, United States and Iran. Israel played into that very skillfully, without question. But I think it's an oversimplification to simply say Israel, Netanyahu is the one who engineered this and Trump fell into a trap. There were many in the United States who wanted to see a fall of the Islamic Republic independent of Israel. We've seen support in the past for ethnic insurgencies, the Kurds, the Baloch. So I think it's a much more complex picture. Did not play an important role.
Now, we've also need to take a broader look. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz also may potentially deal a heavy blow to many Asian economies, including those heavily exposed to the oil and natural gas shipment through the Strait of Hormuz, such as Japan. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi is scheduled to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on March 19th, just days after he demanded that Japan, among a coalition of nations, send ships to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. Both leaders have built a close relations over the past few months, but it now seems that Japan, like other U.S. allies, is starting to think twice, and that the prospect of a coalition is fraying around the edges. So what are Takaichi's priorities, and how will she balance competing pressures? So let me ask you, Einar, let's look at the numbers first, because numbers do speak louder. Approximately 90% of Japan's imported crude oil comes from the Middle East, much of it straight via the Strait of Hormuz. How much leverage, or vulnerability rather, does this create in talks with Washington?
Well, it's really an issue for her. She's just come in. She talked about her economic plan, and unfortunately, this does not fit into it. She wanted some inflation. She did not want rampant inflation. This will really, really hit Japan extremely hard. So she's going to balance her desire. Remember, her ultimate desire is to, quote, normalize Japan. And that means having a much more aggressive ability to have their own military. But if her first foray in this area is a bunch of Japanese ships being shot down as they sunk as they escort ships through the Hormuz Strait, that will end her career. And it will set back the dreams of many people who think like she does, that Japan should be, quote, normalized and take a larger role in the global military and political arena. In terms of Donald Trump, he's just trying to find anybody who will back it up. But Japan by itself does not allow the U.S. to leave. You can't just say, okay, Japan, you escort those things. That's what he wants. He wanted a coalition. He wanted to say, okay, well, whatever I did, doesn't matter about that. You have interests here. You take care of it. Now, they have interests, but this is purely between the U.S. And Iran. And right now, Iran is signaling that they're willing to make deals with countries who abandon the U.S. dollar, and they'll allow those ships through. That could create an even larger division.
I mean, let's not forget Persians are great negotiators. That is according to Donald Trump himself in his book. Now, let me go to our two guests in Tokyo, Japan. Benoit, public pressure is mounting in Japan. The latest polls show that 82%, or around that figure, of Japanese citizens do not support the U.S. strike on Iran, and some 50% do not approve of Prime Minister Takaichi's vague stance on this military action. How much does domestic pressure constrain Takaichi's room for maneuver?
Yeah, of course. It's an important constraint on any actions that she takes. This is not surprising, these numbers, by the way. If you look at previous conflicts that the United States has taken part of, or conflicts in general, over the last 70, 80 years, Japan has proven, and its people have proven, to be pretty risk-averse when it comes to international conflicts. So the numbers that you quoted, 80%, are very consistent with this. Now, it's interesting because Takaichi came to power just a few months ago. She was elected last month, confirming her high popularity. She's kind of riding on a wave of popularity right now. There's a form of, she's still in the kind of honeymoon phase, but right now, this situation puts her in a very difficult situation because if she decides to go along and compromise and provide some kind of support for Trump, that is undoubtedly going to affect her popularity. It's going to affect the standing of the Liberal Democratic Party. At the same time, she might calculate that she's got so much support right now, generally speaking, since the election solidified the grip of her party on the Japanese parliament, that she can perhaps afford politically to offer some kind of support for Japan's only ally, the only ally that is basically undergirding the whole security of the country.
But no, when you say some kind of support, what exactly do you mean? Logistic support, like it provided the U.S. with in previous wars, or intelligence support? What kind of support are you talking about?
Very good question. Yeah, so in the past, Japan has been very hesitant to participate in American operations. I'll give you one example. In 1990, during the first Gulf War by George H. Bush against Iraq, Japan participated in a very minor way, mostly financially, but also sent some minesweepers in the Strait of Hormuz after the war. Now, this is what is apparently being considered right now, the possibility of sending Japanese minesweepers, because we're obviously not talking about the use of any kind of combat operations by Japan. Their constitutions would forbid that anyway. So this is what Trump is seemingly has asked Takaichi. This is what her government is considering, the sending of minesweeper. But even this would be very controversial in Japan and would probably lead to quite a backlash for her government.
Yeah, I want to ask a similar question to Emmanuel. I mean, the Japanese government made it clear that it will not dispatch the so-called self-defense force for escort missions, but some reports indicate that Tokyo is discussing the possibility of sending the self-defense force to the Middle East for quote-unquote intelligence gathering purposes. What do you think can potentially be discussed during the summit between Takaichi and President Trump in the White House, and therefore the role of Japan's self-defense forces?
I would hesitate to make a prediction as to what the results of this extremely high-pressure meeting will be. I would say that within the government, within the Japanese government, there's considerable worry about Takaichi herself. In her previous meeting with Donald Trump, she got into Marine One, the presidential helicopter, in complete abandonment of protocol as her position as prime minister. And most people saw her as being essentially pulled along by Donald Trump without her own will, representing the Japanese people. So there's profound worry within the establishment, within the government, within politics, that she could be pressured in a way that would be inappropriate and would sort of overwhelm the interests of the Japanese people. And there is deep concern about the relationship with the United States across Japanese society. The only problem is what would you do? How would you approach this? And that can't be separated from the conflict within the United States, that the Japanese are getting mixed messages from Washington, D.C. about where the United States is heading.
Right. James, now, facing domestic opposition over Iran and pressure from Washington, do you think Takaichi can maintain alliance stability without undermining Japan's economic security?
This is a visit that comes at the worst possible moment for Takaichi, even though it presumably was arranged prior to the outbreak of the Iran war. But it's also a visit that in many ways is going to set a tone. In other words, if Takaichi stands up to Trump on the demand for support in the Strait of Hormuz, then that will embolden other countries that so far have either been reluctant or resistant to the Trump request to follow suit. On the other hand, if she folds, then she's basically created a crack among U.S. allies who are reluctant to join the U.S. effort. So this is really a make-or-break meeting in some ways.
I mean, make or break, if you also think in security and geopolitical terms, the United States is moving some of its most advanced weapons and weaponry from Asia to the Middle East, from Far East to the Middle East, rather. If you think about THAAD, the anti-missile systems, some of the logistics, weaponry, does this somehow create a security vacuum for America's finest allies in Asia?
It's definitely perceived as such. I think we've also got to keep in mind that as a matter of principle, those transfers of pivoting of troops from the Far East or from Asia to the Middle East is temporary. It's connected to the war. It's not that these troops are permanently being transferred and will permanently remain in the Middle East. So I think those perceptions of a security vacuum are perceptions that basically relate to something more fundamental, which is the reliability of the United States as a security partner. And that's where I think this concern is, rather than there's suddenly this security vacuum that whatever powers in Asia are going to exploit to their advantage.
I mean, that is a good point to be raised, isn't it? A legitimate one, Einar. The relationship between the U.S. and its allies is scrutinized and obviously under strain. Are we witnessing a broader realignment or recalibration, at least, in global geopolitics? And what does this mean to the future of global geopolitics?
Well, the U.S. has basically backed itself into a corner, and this is the greatest danger. When you corner somebody, you don't know what they're going to do. And this is one of the problems that China has, how to deal with this. But in terms of Japan, I'm going to disagree with my colleagues. They haven't put enough emphasis on what the economic impact. 90% of your oil coming from there is no other place to go. And when you do go there, it's going to be a huge cost. In 1973, they took out 79 to 9% of the oil. That resulted in 4x 400% increase. Japan isn't in a position to recalibrate itself. So we can talk about, a lot of things, but right now she's in a situation where she has almost economically no choice but to figure out some sort of deal with Iran if she wants the economic part of things. If she wants to go political, that's fine. She's going to be burning her bridges, but Japan is not enough to do it. One ally saying they're going to send a minesweeper does not get Donald Trump out of Iran. So this is not going to go well. There's really very little that she can do. He can pressure her. She'll make some sort of vague statement, but she cannot completely commit to it because it would be disaster at home. In terms of the future going forward, the U.S. has proven itself unreliable. It did not consult the allies that it now wants to get involved in this war. It just simply went and did it. And, they're saying, well, if you want to go out on your own, then you're on your own.
Yeah. And that will do it for this edition of The Hub. Our programs continue on CGTN. Stay tuned and see you next time.